Before we begin, are there any announcements?
Hello, good morning. I'm Rich Moya-Cannon. I'm the chairman of the board, and got a couple of board-related announcements. The first one is that the board decided to put the 8th principle of racial justice up for a vote at the annual meeting. So we're going to have a couple of ways of educating our voters for our democratic ideals before that vote takes place. So those details will follow. And then secondly, the board met this morning to talk about the pandemic, and we voted to start relaxing the safety restrictions. Yay. The numbers look great right now, and they're continuing to fall. The CDC came out with new guidelines that they're not recommending mandating masks for that risk level. And so the board decided to phase in the relaxation of our restrictions. So starting next week, no masks unless you want them. So masks will be optional instead of mandated. And then the week after that, and Jeanette is holding her breath right now because this affects her. On March 20th, we will resume coffee hour, and that happens to be our Stewardship Sunday, where we're going to have treats. We're going to have food for all. So we will be able to eat those because our restrictions will be gone on that front, and the distancing will also be relaxed at that point. And then finally, the resumption of singing. We have to start singing on March 20th too, right? Yeah. So any case, so that's the good news. Thank you.
I have some announcements. Number one, for the new Soul Matters theme, you'll be getting your packets by email, but I do have 10 printed copies in the back of the church. Someone's printer's not working or something like that, pull one of those copies. Secondly, this is a very exciting week because community meditation starts on Tuesday. We had previously had a weekly meditation, Vipassana style meditation from 7 to 9 on Tuesdays. The church will be open. The Shambhala Community Meditation Group is the anchor for this event, so we're very grateful to them for choosing UU of EA. And anyone who wants to can just pull in their car Tuesdays, 7 o'clock, and show up for the meditation. So thank you for that. And then this is the final week of the food equity campaign. So our treasurer, Mary Facklum, gave me the number this morning at the board meeting. This congregation and its friends have raised a total of $4,135. We exceeded our match of $3,250. So we went back to the donor and said, hey, we beat the match. What do you think? And the donor said, I will match up $6,250 so we can double the number of shares. We can get to 20 shares, but there's one proviso, and that is if we get to 20 shares, the donor requires that 10% of those shares be allocated for the people in need in our own congregation. So we would take 2 full shares or 4 half shares. Someone who would like to apply just needs to, we'll create a process for application to apply to have access to those vegetables if we get to that point. And how we would get to that point, because it seems like they've been just not going to cover off the ball raising money for that, but it's about half of our congregation, and many of our friends who have visited have contributed. So there's no donation that's too small. So if you haven't contributed, and you think this is a worthy cause, by all means, pick up an envelope in the back and send it in. And this is the last time you'll be hearing this request, but I'll give you an update next week. Thank you. Oh, yes, yeah. So the reason, yeah, so for anyone, I apologize. So what makes this an exciting campaign, and what is this campaign about for someone who's hearing it for the first time? This is a social justice campaign, and it's an important and exciting one. What makes it important is that it addresses food scarcity and soil toxicity, which exists for many in Buffalo, but particularly for the people of Buffalo's East Side. What makes it exciting to us at UUEA is that members have often said, okay, we're standing for racial justice, we're writing letters, but we really want to do something that's more impactful to the communities that we care about. So someone came up with this idea and started this process, and an anonymous member of this church offered to match the purchase of CSA shares from Laura Culligan of Dirt Rich Farm to give to the people of Buffalo's East Side. For those who don't know, Laura Culligan of Dirt Rich grew up attending UUEA. So that's another reason that we're excited about it, because this campaign not only helps people in East Buffalo who have had limited access to the healthy soil that we have an abundance of in the South towns, but it supports a local farmer whom we care about. So if we raise $3,200, which we have exceeded, so we've raised $4,235, there's a match of $4,135 for that, which will enable us to buy about 13 or 14 shares. I didn't do the math. But it's also a collaboration. We're not doing this as a bunch of predominantly white people to figure out what's right for East Side. We have collaborated with Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor. The African Heritage Co-op has donated the transportation to pick up the vegetables from Dirt Rich Farm in Springville and bring it to the East Side. And then the leaders in the Michigan Street corridor are going to distribute it to their community because they know their community best. And to avoid waste and to make sure that as many families as possible benefit, it will be done on a weekly basis for 19 weeks on a first come, first served basis. So that's the nature of the campaign. This is the last week. If you haven't given, please, whatever you can give, doesn't matter. There's no donation too large or too small. So thank you very much. So Sue's question is, could we work with The Rock? And I would say that anyone working with The Rock, that would be a separate campaign. This is a collaboration. This is a racial justice initiative, and we're working with Michigan Street and the East Side of Buffalo. We do work with The Rock. We definitely contribute to The Rock when they ask for money for food equity at Christmas time, and we do participate if there is a Feed More New York campaign or whatever The Rock does. I think that The Rock picks up food from various locations and provides food, and then there's a pickup that they do that Catherine has led the charge, getting 10 volunteers to help hand out those vegetables. But that is definitely a separate campaign. So certainly we can do it if we have the energy and the desire to participate in one of their campaigns. Like all the churches in East Aurora who participate with them. Yes. But this particular one is racial justice. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Are there any other announcements? I'll begin the service by acknowledging that our nation was largely built on ancestral land of Native nations, including where I'm standing right now, and the labor of enslaved peoples. May we persevere to achieve a clear understanding of our shared past and utilize these lessons learned for good and for progress. join me as I lit the chalice. The chalice lighting words are printed on the order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. We turn to Reverend Tina for our opening words.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. Now, usually when I come and offer opening words, I start with a silly little story that highlights why we come to church. And I have one, right? It's typed right here. But I have to be honest. This morning, as I was driving here, I thought to myself, it can't be a silly story today. I woke up this morning and I looked at the news. Not usually a good thing to do early in the morning, but I was struck by one particular photograph that just really got me in the heart and the stomach. It was a photo, maybe you've seen it, of a line of baby carriages lined up outside the train station in Poland. It was for the mothers who had left the Ukraine with their children in arms, so they would have a place to put them when they got off the train. And then I went down the rabbit hole. What could I do? What could I possibly do? And maybe you're all feeling the same way. Can I contribute here? Can I do that? What is even going to make a difference? And that's what I think we do as Unitarians, right? We Unitarian Universalists, we go right there. How can I make a difference? And so I started navigating the web. Now, mind you, this is 5:30 this morning. And I know I've got to get dressed and make it here to be with you. And I have to somehow feel better about those carriages because they hurt my heart. And then I remembered that there is a Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which operates all over the world and is very prominent in Transylvania, Hungary, and in Romania. And those are places right now that Unitarians are stepping forward to help the refugees. And I thought, okay, we've got this. We can do this. And I went on their website, and sure enough, right there is the donate button. And then I thought, wait a minute, Tina, there's people in your community from Afghanistan who are still not settled. There's people in Buffalo, in your area, who are not settled. There's immigrants. There is so much to do. So then I went down that rabbit hole, which is, oh my God, how can we possibly do everything? And then I remembered this quote that I read on Twitter the other day, so I wrote it down for you on the back of my silly story, which I'll save for the next time. Here's what it says. It can be overwhelming to witness, experience, take in all the injustices in the moment. The good news is that they are all connected. So if your little corner of work involves pulling one of the threads, you're helping unravel the whole damn cloth. Your contributions to the CSA helps unravel the whole damn cloth. Anything we donate, anything we do in our small circle of the world helps unravel the whole damn cloth. And that's, friends, why we come to church. We come here so that we have one another, so we can hold one another to witness the injustices, to stay solid on the ground. I was whipping all over the highway coming here today because of the winds, and I thought to myself, no, I am solid on the ground because I'm coming to church today. And this is where we find that connection. So welcome to our celebration of life There'll be lots of times for silly stories, but today, let's begin to unravel the tapestry of oppression together. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. We are reminded that the UUEA cannot do anything without members and friends showing up and supporting each other. Sincere thanks to those who participate in events, volunteer their time, share their talents, or are in the position to be generous. If you are inclined to give after the service, there is a plate in the back on the bookshelf, or you may do so online at uuea.org.
So this is a reading by Anne Lamott. I have a lot of faith, but I'm also afraid a lot and have no real certainty about anything. I remembered something Father Tom had told me, that the opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. Certainty is missing the point entirely. Faith includes noticing the mess, the emptiness and discomfort, and letting it be there until some light returns.
That was our reader, Helen Schneider, and we're grateful that she offered that to us today. As Mary mentioned earlier, the worship theme for this month is renewing faith. We're also in the Christian season of Lent. Last Wednesday was Ash Wednesday. It's a holy day in the Christian calendar on which the faithful repent their sins and commit to a hopeful future. Now, you see them, mostly Catholics, go about their business on Ash Wednesday with a smudge of ashes on their forehead. Ash Wednesday begins 6.5 weeks of fasting and keeping their faith forefront in their days. It's a time of humble and thoughtful prayer. I was particularly struck last Wednesday seeing President Biden answer questions about the horrific Russian invasion of Ukraine with that humble smudge of ashes on his forehead. At a time when the world is literally on fire, this powerful man honored this holy day and renewed his faith for all of us to witness. Now, I've been thinking about this for days because during the time of pandemic and global turmoil, I believe the world needs renewed faith in humankind. It needs voices of faith to point to a better way to live. And it needs faith that honors the inherent worth and dignity of all beings. Friends, I believe the world needs our faith as one of its guiding lights. But frankly, it's complicated. Even the name of our religion is complicated. It's a mouthful, right? Unitarian Universalism. It's a lot harder to say than Catholic or Christian or Muslim. It's even harder to explain sometimes. I crave a UU symbol that's universally understood, like a cross or a fish or a smudge of ashes on the forehead, or a slogan as simple as "What would Jesus do?" While our chalice is a beautiful symbol of our faith, even this takes a long time to explain, and I suspect not all of us know where it comes from. But I believe the world needs our message. It needs to see the challenges of our time through the lens of our Unitarian Universalist values and principles. The world community needs our UU voice to counter the religious intolerance that has become so prevalent here in the United States. Now, perhaps we can blame the media, which seems to promote so many misconceptions that we hold about the news we consume. Frankly, deciphering what is true and what is fake or what is skewed, well, it's a full-time job. But the reality is that the Christian right has taken over the conversation about religion in our country and on the media. It has effectively imposed its worldview on our public. And the worldview has infiltrated our political system, denying rights and promoting oppression. And that's interesting to me because statistically, Christians are not a singular group. It is true that here in the United Research Center illustrates that 34% of evangelicals, 64% of mainline Protestants, and 52% of Catholics support reproductive rights, including the right of women to choose an abortion. And yet, the conservative Christian voice has become dominant and privileged in our society. It has become an excuse for religious bigotry. So how'd this happen? Well, I'm going to take you back a few years, beginning in 1990. Politically active Christians who had called themselves the religious right or the Christian right or the Christian conservatives began to realize that those terms were being viewed as pejorative, much as individuals who identified as liberal found that that was being viewed as pejorative and shifted to become progressives. The politically active conservative Christians started calling themselves simply Christians. And as such, erroneously spoke for the entire and diverse Christian faith. And they were and are focused and active and tenacious and loud. They choose single issue advocacy, such as abortion, and mobilize. And a misconception occurred. They became the representation of all Christians in the United States. And ultimately, their message represented all legitimate religious people in the US. Their voice was indeed privileged. When the media wanted to know what the religious citizens of the US thought, who did they go to? They went to the Christians. They went to the conservative Christians, the loudest Christians. But in my not so humble Unitarian Universalist opinion, this minority of religious voices got the Christian message wrong. Here's an excerpt from an essay by Bill McKibben. He's an environmental activist. The essay is called The Christian Paradox: How a Faithful Nation Got Jesus Wrong. Here's the quote. A rich man came to Jesus one day and asked him, "What should I do to get into heaven?" Jesus did not say he should invest, spend, and let the benefits trickle down. He said, "Sell what you have, give your money away to the poor, and follow me." McKibben continues to say, few plainer words have been spoken. And yet, for some reason, the Christian Coalition of America, founded in 1989, in order to, in their words, quote, preserve and protect and defend the Judeo-Christian values that make this country strong and the greatest country in history. Well, this group of people proclaimed in 2004 that its top legislative priority would be making permanent President Bush's 2001 federal tax cuts. Now, this may seem like ancient history and a long time ago, but the Tax Policy Center today attributes much of the rise that we see in income inequality from the Bush administration tax policy. On the other hand, I happen to think that we as Unitarian Universalists, well, we understand the message of Jesus and the other prophets who are sources of our wisdom. The message that tells us to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and visit the sick and honor those that are different from us and invite the stranger into our home and into our heart. It shows up in our UU principles. It's the core of our social justice work. Here at this church, you have a banner, Black Lives Matter, and you have fought bravely with town officials and neighbors to keep your banner there. You have proclaimed your faith. You have shared your values for all people to see. Now, I do want to be cautious here because I don't want to gloat and claim superiority. We UUs have done a lot of bad, wrong things in our history. We didn't always get it right. We still don't always get it right. And frankly, saying that we got it right and they got it wrong, well, that just serves to separate us even more. However, I believe that it is essential that we add our voice to the conversation in this society and reclaim a religious perspective that embraces the true values of all religions. The simple golden rule, treat others as you would wish to be treated. And friends, that's hard work. It's clear from the circumstances in our society today, the treatment of oppressed populations, the raging fights over critical race theory being taught in the schools, which, by the way, it is not, and the decision of our current government representatives regarding the suppression of voting rights and a woman's agency over her own body. It is clear to me, and hopefully to you, that the voice of people of faith, Unitarian Universalists, is desperately needed in the public arena. And yet, it is hard for us to join the conversation. We volunteer, we march, we work for justice tirelessly, but we are shy at claiming our faith and speaking in unity. Our voice is less focused and often more secular than religious. And without a religious lens, I'm afraid it loses some of its gravitas. In a country where 90% of the population professes a belief in a higher power, claiming moral values based on religion holds more sway. It just does. But more often than not, we UUs shy away from proclaiming our faith. I include myself in this story. I think there are reasons for this, reasons that we might explore this month when our worship theme is to consider what it means to renew our faith. We have an introductory program called Starting Point. Maybe some of you have participated in it. It's a way for people who are new to Unitarian Universalism to find out more about our religion and our community. Now, when I facilitated this program at the last church I served, we had an exercise called the belief spectrum. We asked our newcomers to place themselves on a continuum that represented their beliefs. It's when we could be in person more often. We'd make divergent statements such as, I am theist, I am atheist, and we'd ask people to stand on the line, the imaginary line, in a place that represented their beliefs. I liked to participate in this exercise and then ask folks to explain their position. We'd use the exercise to illustrate the diversity of beliefs that we hold and how this community, our community, is a container for all individuals and what they bring when they join us. Now, there was one statement that always turns out very interesting. I am spiritual, I am religious. Invariably, where did people cluster? Where do you think? Over here. Spirituality won every time. Very often, I was the only one over here on the religious side. And it left me wondering, what is it about identifying as religious that's just so challenging? Why is spirituality more acceptable, more desirable? Why is it hard to claim our religious self? In her book, Belief Without Borders, The author, Linda Mercacante, interviews people who claim to be spiritual but not religious. She points out that people who identify as spiritual actually have beliefs and rituals and practices that could legitimately be termed religious. They often link their existence to something larger and deal with the same existential questions that have occupied our religion and all religions for ages. They live their values in the world in various ways, and they are searching to make meaning from their own life. It is their repudiation of the dominant Christian message that makes them shun the identity of being religious. They're fighting against the dominant Christian voice that we talked about earlier. They reject a God who is judgmental and wrathful. They eschew religion that is oppressive and views humans as flawed and born bad. Now, whether they have personally experienced this kind of religion or only heard about it, they reject religion because it is the only religious voice they've heard. And it doesn't match the experience of their values. I think many UUs have this perspective. I grew up Roman Catholic and left the church, frankly, because I had way too many questions for that particular faith. Doubt was not something that was encouraged in Catholicism, and I probably left when I was around 18 or 19, but I didn't find Unitarian Universalism till I was 35. That's a long, long time ago, but I thought to myself when I found it, if only I had known this existed, my life would have been different. But nobody told me about Unitarian Universalism. And when I was 35, the way I found out about our faith was I went to a memorial of my best friend who died and was buried from a UU church. She was a UU and she didn't tell me. I'm not blaming her, but it makes me wonder why we're not proclaiming our faith. Now, I also think that we as UUs avoid owning the identity as religious people because for decades, a dominant voice in our faith has been secular humanism, the perspective that embraces reason and ethics and social justice as the basis of our morality, while specifically rejecting religious dogma and supernaturalism. And all that is good and all that is honorable. However, it stifles our moral voice in the wider community. I discussed this with a friend of mine who will remain anonymous. He is an atheist and a secular humanist. He said to me, I don't want to be called religious because I think people who believe in God are not quite as smart as I am, and I don't want to associate with that. He went on to qualify, I'm not particularly proud of that at all. I think this is a dangerous arrogance that separates us from others and limits the reach of our voice in the community. Now, maybe you're sitting there right now thinking we'd be better off as a country if we abandoned all this religion for spirituality and rationality. But we're not going to. Like it or not, for the foreseeable future, this will be a religious nation, a Christian nation. The question is, what kind of religious nation are we? And who gets to define it? It's clear to me that a progressive religious voice is needed now more than ever. And this is what our religion has to offer. Paraphrased from the words of UU minister Scott Alexander. In a world with so much hatred and violence, we have a religion that proclaims the inherent worth and dignity of every person. In a world with so much brutality and fear, we have a religion that seeks justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. In a world where so many persons are abused and neglected, we have a religion that calls us to accept one another and encourage one another in spiritual growth. In a world with so much tyranny and oppression, we have a religion that affirms the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. In a world with so much environmental degradation, we have a religion that advocates respect for the interconnected web of all existence. In a world with so much uncertainty and despair, we have a religion that teaches our hearts to hope and our hands to care. Yes, the world needs our voice, and it needs us to speak as a religious authority, defining the values and morals that advance humankind in our natural world. But friends, we also need religion. We need faith. Our times are extraordinary. We're being called to support our principles every turn in our life. It is necessary for our future, our freedom as people of the U.S. Together, as a religious movement, our voice is stronger. It carries gravitas that no singular voice can declare. We claim a theological grounding in justice, equity, and compassion that dates back centuries. Standing alone is exhausting. Standing together, we expand our spiritual capacity to be present to troubling times. Our religious principles offer us a moral foundation on which to rest and find sustenance. Our connection to one another and to our religion sustains us for the long haul. In the midst of turmoil that is our country and our world, babies are born, people die, couples pledge their love to one another, while others part ways. We argue, we make up, we fall down, we get up, we find joy, we feel sadness. Children grow, children leave, and we love each other as best we can. This is the breath of our religious community. It breathes through us and among us each day, sustaining us imperfectly at best. It is the breath that animates our voice in the world. I am Unitarian Universalist, and my voice matters, and I will use it with the strength of my community and my religion to make a difference in this world. And if you are with me, renew your faith, claim the awesome identity, become the religious voice of reason and love, own your identity as Unitarian Universalist, and keep talking. Together, we stand behind the banner of equity, justice, and compassion. Together, we change the world. May it be so. And amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Please join me for the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Turn to Tina for closing words.
I'm going to close today with a quote that I started with, because I think it requires repeating. It can be overwhelming to witness experience take in all the injustices of the moment. The good news is that they are all connected. So if your little corner of work involves pulling one of those threads, you're helping unravel the whole damn cloth. Thank you.